All the code in the world can't fix ego. I'm Ray Myers. Welcome to Craft versus Cruft. I've been programming professionally for about 12 years, and today I'd like to tell you about why software engineering is an inherently social pursuit. If your only exposure to what we do is either from watching movies or from perhaps taking a computer science degree program, you might be forgiven for thinking that basically our only interaction is with our text editor and the compiler. Because you go to school for this, that's about all that happens. A teacher gives you an assignment, you're interacting with the teacher, I guess. You get the assignment, you do it, it's graded once, it's thrown away. The whole source code might be, less than a couple hundred lines. And not a lot of people in the equation here, maybe the people who created the compiler, but other than that. And also the software doesn't go anywhere and provide any long-term value for anyone. So it's not like the real world in a lot of ways, or at least the business world to whatever extent that it's real. But you get out there and that's not what happens at all. And in fact, when you're done working on your tickets and have completed some code that you're deploying, do you throw that source code away because now you've got the binaries and you only needed it to talk to the machine? So what's the point of the source code? No, you don't throw it away, actually. You check it into version control. Why? Because of people. People are going to read it. You got the source code from the team that created this code base before you. You will work on it with your peers, and you will pass it on to the people after you. Now, Hal Abelson, in Structure and Interpretation of Computer Programs, which is a fantastic introduction to computer science, available as a book for free online, as well as an 80s MIT lecture series, which I really enjoy. He said that the purpose of a computer program is to be read by people and only incidentally to be executed by a machine. And that is absolutely true. As you write code and maintain code, you are using your skills of written communication to communicate intent. What exactly is this supposed to be doing? to the next person to read it, and depending on how well or poorly you use those skills, it will do a good or bad job at that, and making something that can both do the business requirements and communicate its intent clearly. That's a real challenge, and something that is worth getting good at. So that's one form of communication and social interaction that we're kind of passively doing, whether we acknowledge it or not. What else? Well, we don't just create these programs so other programmers can kind of admire each other's work, give it some kind of Metacritic review on Rotten Tomatoes and move on. No, we write it so that it can be run and used by people, and they will interact with our software that they've bought or however they've come to access it, and they will have a good experience or a bad experience. Hopefully that interaction you have with them will be more than passive. Hopefully you'll at some point get to occasionally see their reactions directly and hear the user feedback. It's good when that goes all the way back to developers, helps us think about what we do. One of the reasons I like working on internal apps so much, actually, is that I get to see my users. So you got your users, you got your product owners, the business analysts that have done market research and determined what they think the users would like to see. You're interacting with them as they've come up with requirements, you're negotiating requirements and timeline, you're delivering, you're agreeing that the right things have been delivered, talking about next steps. You're definitely interacting with them. Can you think of anyone else? Depending on your team topology, there's probably some kind of ops team, release engineering, perhaps change management, different types of things, QA, and that's just inside your company. There's also, depending on the kind of application, between 5 and maybe 500 third-party libraries that you're building on and using in your code base. So the quirks and conventions of dozens to hundreds to thousands of people are at work in your code base and software delivery lifecycle. Your success is going to be dependent not just on how well you use your text editor, but how well you navigate that ecosystem. Then at this point it should be clear this is a highly social endeavor. This is a massively multiplayer online game we've got going here. And you're neglecting a huge part of the picture if you don't acknowledge that. So if it's so clear, do I even need to make this video? Is there any misconception whatsoever? Well, let's take a pulse here. I saw a Quora question recently. Why are software developers rude? Aha! Great opportunity to see how well our profession takes feedback. So let's look at a couple of these answers, and I don't mean to pick on these individual people. These are things that I've heard a lot of people say, and this is a convenient example of someone saying them, but I think that these are pretty broadly held views, and I want to address them for that reason, not just pick on you guys. So first we have Tim with the top-rated answer, and he says, well, because we need to be rude to do our jobs well. Some people need to be rude, I'm paraphrasing here, because they've got technical expertise, and you may think it's rude to disagree at all or criticize at all, but that's something that you need to do, and one way or another, we've got to do that. And then, he goes on to make some good points, like it's possible to do that without being rude and so on and so forth. That's true. I kind of would flip-flop these. I would say, like, a lot of us aren't good at disagreeing productively, and that's not a unique problem to have to deal with, that like only we have technical expertise and only we have to deal with the problem of disagreeing. I think that's something that is, anyone who has coworkers has to deal with that sort of thing, and anyone who has expertise of any kind, especially. So we shouldn't think that we're uniquely in the position that we have to be rude by disagreeing. I think that that's a sign that you haven't put a lot of work into learning how to disagree productively. So let me give you an example. Suppose someone is presenting a solution that they worked very hard on for the architecture of some problem you've got to solve. And as you watch the presentation and this meeting, you realize this is not going to work for you. This is wrong. Well, we've seen people who say it that way, right? Who say, "Hey, this is not going to work for this reason. This is wrong." And that's starting the conversation very adversarially. And you might not get a great result that way. You might lose credit with this person if you haven't built it up in the past. And what you could do instead, for example, is you could say, "I have a question. How could I use your solution to handle this scenario? Show me." And they are not then thinking that you're just trying to poke a hole, that you have a legitimate question, which you do. And they might actually have some more information that they hadn't, gotten to in the presentation, or they'll realize, oh, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. I guess it doesn't handle that. I guess we got to deal with that. But you didn't start the conversation off in such an adversarial way. That's just one example, right? And there are other times when you might just decide in a different setting you're going to have that conversation. If you have some serious concern, you might not raise it in a situation that's going to put that person on the defensive. And these are kind of subtle points, but understand that disagreeing or not is not a binary thing, like where I either have to be a rude person and criticize and disagree, or I will not be giving my expertise and input. A lot of people think in that binary sense. It's not that at all. And there's a case where you can develop these skills, but first you have to acknowledge that they are skills and they are important to what you do. Another example comes from Jeremy, and he starts out real philosophical out the gate. What is rude? Is it rude to ask about someone's missing arm? Is it rude to ask about someone's cultural background? Well, I mean, yeah, often I could imagine situations where it definitely would be rude to ask about those kinds of things. Not always, but sometimes. It kind of seems like you don't know how to read a room there very well, sir. But he goes on to say, you see, programmers have to deal with machines, and we have to make these things that are very syntactically correct, that'll either work or they won't. And it's kind of all or nothing, and it's got to be very precise and literal. And because we spend our time doing that, we're often bad communicators in terms of communicating with people. And he's kind of like right up to this point, except to not then say, and that's something we should work on. He basically says, and that's just how it is. And, you know, instead of thinking we're rude, you're rude for not learning how to deal with us better, and so on and so forth. Like, it's two-way street, man. Like, I wanna say, sorry fella, but like, guys, this doesn't fly. Let's not think that if we lack social skills, that is just how it is and everyone else needs to learn to deal with us. That is very unhealthy and will limit your growth in the industry. It will limit the amount of impact you're able to have, the level of position you'll be able to achieve. And we need to start looking at these soft skills, and there's a great book called Soft Skills. I'll link to that in the description. If we don't have these, we can simply learn them. We can spend a little time getting a little better and get great results from doing that. Just as we have to learn the latest JavaScript framework every year or so, and so forth. You know, I've probably, in some professional context for some length of time, used maybe 10 plus programming languages. And what, I'm not going to learn how to communicate with human beings if I can learn all of these things as the need arises? That's a ridiculous outlook to have. Where you start out isn't where you have to keep being. So that's my main message here. Another concept I want to get at, what often is lacking in a lot of kinds of professional relationships, is empathy, right? So you need to have empathy for other developers, more junior and more senior to yourself. You need to have empathy for, you know, your product owner, for your end users, empathy for ops that are running your code and maybe responding to calls if things don't go well. You need to have empathy even for managers. I know we like to denigrate managers sometimes, but most of the time they're on your side for the greater good of all, to greater or lesser effect. And Andrea Goulet has a great set of talks on empathy and software development. So I'll let you follow up with her and get some more information. Another quick tip, I like to have a mental model in my head, best I can suss out, about the person that I'm talking to in terms of what do they know about, what do they not know about, and what do they care and not care about, as I'm trying to explain some concept. And that'll kind of help me on what level of resolution I should go into and which things do I need to provide some extra explanation for, or maybe I should just gloss over at all. So you can think about a question like, what is DevOps? And depending on who I'm talking to, if it's a junior developer or someone in another role, maybe someone who doesn't work in software at all, I might have very different answers, but they are all truthful answers and accurate as far as they go, and hopefully useful to the person that I'm talking to. So you might try that as an exercise to the viewer. I think there's really a lot more on this realm that we could get into, but I'm gonna leave that for another time, and you can go ahead and let me know which particular aspects of this and other topics you might like to hear about. Thank you very much for tuning in, and remember what Lao Tzu said in Tao Te Ching, with patience the most tangled cord may be undone. Thank you.